Thank you. I'd like to start this sermon with an historical anecdote. It takes place in the 1950s, a period of repression when the U.S. government used the House Un-American Activities Committee, the FBI, and other agencies to create a climate of fear by driving out actual and suspected communists from influential roles in entertainment, media, academia, and the labor movement. Not only did this Red Scare succeed directly in decapitating progressive movements by cutting off a generation of their most committed leaders, it also installed enough fear in our civic institutions that, as is the case today, many of them cowardly embraced repression, voluntarily weeding out anyone who had even an inkling of disagreement with our economic or political systems. Most labor unions, for example, adopted anti-communist oaths of membership, enforcing a climate of suspicion against any kind of dissent. As a result, many dedicated union officials lost their jobs, but not Wayne Hawley. Wayne chaired the union local at the Geneva Steel Mill, located between Salt Lake City and Provo, Utah. Closed now, but still in operation when I lived in Utah in the 1980s. Wayne was also the chair of Utah's branch of the Communist Party. Yes, Utah had one. He was not a mere suspect, but an actual card-carrying and dues-paying communist. By all accounts I've heard, Wayne was an exemplary local union president, defending his members and negotiating decent contracts. The members of his local refused to be turned against him. He kept his job until he retired. Why, in an area most of us correctly think of as conservative, did the Red Scare score such a failure? Now, as you might reasonably assume, the plant's employees were almost all Mormon, as was Wayne. I don't know to what extent he still literally believed in Mormonism as a religion. It might seem pretty contradictory to believing in an orthodox form of atheistic Marxism, but he never left the church. He raised his family in it and paid his tithes, actively participating in the day-to-day life of a small, tightly woven community. Now, did his coworkers believe in communism or join the party? Very few did. But Wayne was one of theirs, and you don't mess with community. This story keeps coming back to me in our present political context. Here we are in this huge crisis that might make the Red Scare seem a bit quaint. What do we do now when we are facing a growing fascist repression that is not only blacklisting actors and academics, but literally disappearing and even torturing and killing our immigrant neighbors? Well, here's some lessons that I draw from Wayne's life. Defend your beliefs openly, even if they are not the majority viewpoint. People admire defiance. They want to know you have the courage of your convictions. In the face of a true threat to all that we hold dear, keep protesting, keep speaking up. No guarantees that it will save you or your communities, but being courageous and forthright will win you respect, which just might be your best individual and collective defense. Loyally serve the people you dare to lead and do your job well. Not everyone agreed with Wayne's politics, but they respected his leadership in the Union, repeatedly returning him to office, acknowledging that the work he did was beneficial. Because of his active support to his community, they knew also that he was there for them, and not just for his own ego or some abstract political ideology. Ground yourself where you are and look after the people you know. Truly, treat your neighbors and coworkers as yourself, regardless of their religious or political beliefs. And when you are under attack, they are likely to return the favor. As a woman who spent 25 years in blue-collar jobs as a union activist, I prided myself on serving my coworkers equally, even those who discriminated against me. That attitude paid off many times, winning me support against both management and certain recalcitrant colleagues. Lastly, being part of a cohesive spiritual community offers many benefits. In Wayne's case, being a Mormon was probably a plus because Mormons do have a communal streak and a very strong tradition of internal mutual aid. However, most religious communities care for members in need. Part of what inspired me to become a minister, which I did after retiring from both blue and white collar jobs in the utility industry, as Glenn mentioned, was the great help my Unitarian Universalist congregation gave my children and me when my then husband died at 48 years old. I wanted to pay it forward. As Unitarian Universalists, we seek to build congregations into cohesive communities, which at their best serve not only us, but the broader communities in which we exist. Alone, none of us can do all that much to change political outcomes. Even with organized resistance, our lives are likely to get a lot harder in the foreseeable future. Many of us are old enough that we cannot expect to live long enough to see a possible reversal of our collective hardships. Yet, we can all strive to build communities grounded in mutual aid and care that live as well as possible in the present moment. Wayne Hawley persevered well into his 90s, and he never gave in to cynicism and despair. Now, it's common to think of US Americans as individualistic and obsessed with self-reliance. Even to be people who, like Elon Musk, see empathy as a weakness. Superficially, I believe there's some truth to that stereotype, but ultimately, I don't believe it to be the last word. Why not? First, we're human, and humans are social beings who have always depended on each other's products and services. Mutual aid provided in community is essential to human survival. Second, our current economic and governmental systems, having commodified most products and services, do not encourage activities that lack a profit motive. But in times of widespread need, people do tend to pull together and help each other anyway. And we in the US are no exception. And if you doubt this, I urge you to read the excellent book, Paradise in Hell, by Rebecca Solnit, documenting the spontaneous mutual aid and camaraderie that arise among us when facing destructive earthquakes, wildfires, and storms. Now, one could argue that this response is mere self-interest, not altruism, since it rarely lasts after the disaster resolves. However, Solnit interviewed many disaster survivors who look back fondly on this period of their lives as a kind of peak experience. Not because they would like to relive the fear and the hardship, certainly not, but because they wish the collective spirit could have continued permanently. Underneath our prickliness, most of us have a deep longing for such profound connection. Third, when we are exposed to true suffering, our judgments about proverbial others often start to break down. We see this today in the rapidly growing public outrage against Israel's genocide of the Palestinians and against Nazi-style attacks on immigrants. When we see pictures of skeletal children nearing inevitable death, we often begin to question narratives that would justify such atrocities. And even if our ancestors, like mine, arrived in the US many generations ago, almost all of us interact with recent immigrants who we know to be law-abiding and caring and hardworking members of our broader communities. The father coaching our child's sports team, the server at our favorite coffee shop, the home healthcare worker assisting a disabled relative. Regardless of our political views, when people we care about are under attack, we tend to do what that popular chant says, stand up, fight back. Or we help out, donating our services and goods and money. Lastly, it often takes crises hitting home, either practically or emotionally, to realize we too are more vulnerable than we thought, that we could be next, which can lead to combining forces with others, grounded in enlightened self-interest. Unfortunately, though, not all communities are inclusive and healthy. Even we UUs are often prone to a kind of elitist self-righteousness that limits our effectiveness. Religious communities can often be sources of rigid social mores and discriminatory practices. For example, whatever Wayne may have believed, it is doubtful his community would have welcomed peoples of color or LGBTQ people into their midst. Though his party was racially integrated and supported the civil rights movement, it too had yet to acknowledge the full humanity of queer people, and it often tokenized the contributions of anyone not white and male, and was complicit in many violations of human rights abroad. To resist fascism, let's be clear about that, and its faithful companion, Christian nationalism, which defies the shared values held by most religions of welcoming the stranger or of treating our neighbors as ourselves, I believe we must rely on a combination of evidence and faith. The evidence shows that effective resistance to oppression requires communities grounded in mutuality and service and in the trust earned by their provision. At best, we win. At worst, we lived moral lives of service and advocacy in support of victories we never got to experience. Faith allows us to persevere in the belief those victories will come, even without us. Though even then, it will take strong communities of loving kindness, advocacy, and aid to preserve them. Thus, no matter what the odds, may we strengthen our connections to each other, and may we widen the circle of our faith, challenging our own tendencies toward exclusion. May it be so, and blessed be.